We're about to cover a horrible tragedy that just occurred in America. There was a mass shooting in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where a trans shooter killed 2 children and injured up to 17. There's a lot to unpack here. It's currently being investigated as a domestic act of terrorism because it was potentially, seemingly targeted at Catholics, Christians, and conservatives. Prior to the incident, Robin Westman, who changed their name in 2020, posted a video to YouTube, which was immediately taken down, including a manifesto written in Cyrillic. It has yet to be decoded, along with a cache or armory of weapons that are all labeled with themes and motifs alluding to the violence that's about to unfold. Written on his guns and magazines were things like, "Kill Trump now, 6 million was not enough," referring to the Holocaust. "For the children, I'm the woker baby. Why so queerious?" He uploaded an 11-minute video showing his guns, magazines, and manifesto and posted it on YouTube shortly before carrying out this act of terrorism, along with drawings that actually seem demonic. You don't even have to be religious to understand the iconography. So let's see what is unfolding.
Welcome back. Breaking right now, FBI Director Kash Patel just posted on X, quote, "The FBI is investigating this shooting as an act of domestic terrorism and a hate crime targeting Catholics. There were 2 fatalities, an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. In addition to those lives lost, 14 children and 3 adults have been injured. A bunch of them remain in critical condition. The shooter has been identified as Robin Westman. Born Robert Westman. The FBI is going to continue to provide updates on our ongoing investigation with the public as we are able." Let's go ahead and bring in retired NYPD Inspector Paul Morrow, an attorney, also a Fox News contributor. Paul, why do you think they are now pursuing?
Now, it goes without saying the optics here are the elephant in the room. The shooter was transgender, which opens up Pandora's box of mental illness and how we actually deal with that in this country.
This as an act of terrorism.
Look, they may have some indicia that there was this animus toward a particular religious group, which would make it a hate crime and potentially an act of terrorism if you have a mass shooting carried out for an ideological purpose. That is to say, if you get violence plus an ideological purpose, you get into the terrorism area. But let's be clear, at the federal level, you almost always need some connection to a foreign power. So the hate crime angle relative to this at the federal level is far more likely than it would be a terrorism case. But look, it's good.
This is only going to make people dislike transgenders more or put the blame on conservatives even more. That's exactly right. Either way, it's adding fuel to the fire.
They're checking the boxing. It's good that they're looking at it that way. And they may have found something. You know, they may have had an interview with somebody who told them this, or they already got into the computer. There may be something there.
Could a terrorism designation kind of give the investigators more resources?
I mean, if you're asking me, my opinion, this is 100% an act of terrorism. I don't even know how it has to be investigated. Just look at the fucking video. I'm not going to pull it up because YouTube ripped that shit down already. But all the resources are available on X.
Is we are some kind of a benefit in pursuing, you know, whatever information can be gleaned about this.
You know,
now that the guy's dead.
In a practical sense, in a case like this, it's unlikely that it's going to matter. In a terrorism case, the reason you want that designation as a terrorist...
Isn't this more about disaffected men because the transgender is doing this usually go one way? That's a great point. Statistically speaking, there are a lot more male to female transgenders than there are female to male. And almost always in extreme acts of violence, it's that archetype.
Terrorist entity is because what you get then is that anything that's done in furtherance of that terrorist group, let's just say it's Al-Qaeda for the sake of argument, right, in a different instance.
The real scary part about this is that this snowballs. The more you talk about it, the more that these shooters are mentioned and idolized and pedestalized. In fact, there were many written references on the magazines to other mass shooters, some of them also transgender.
And anything you do that's in furtherance of that, think of it as conspiracy. Anything that you're doing in furtherance of the group is chargeable. And so that's why you like that bigger designation, because it takes you into a sort of a group. And anything you're doing on behalf of the group, like a RICO charge, anything you're doing on behalf of this group ends up being chargeable. But again, at the federal level, and this is why I've been somebody, and people disagree with me on this, and reasonable minds can disagree. I get it, but I have often advocated that we should be.
I just fucking hate living in a country where this can happen at any time. Just innocent lives ripped away for no reason.
Looking hard at a domestic terrorism charge, which can be modeled on the state terrorism charges that do exist around the country, and that is simply violence for an ideological purpose. And you don't need necessarily a protected class like a religion or a particular ethnicity, but violence for an ideological purpose, that would get you to a terrorism charge. We don't have that, and so likely I think if the feds
What's the solution? I don't have one. I have no idea.
do charge here, it'll be more in the hate crime area, unless some fact that we don't know about now comes to light.
Well, and does any of this, I mean, not to be crude, but this guy is a murderer. He is now dead. Does it matter?
No, he's dead, so it doesn't really matter in terms of the investigation. I mean, just to be blunt.
I guess Christ Max is all you can do. Well, that's what these people were doing, and they just got fucking killed. They were in church.
About it, and like I said, unless he does end up getting linked to a group, and let's take the terrorism charge out. Let's say he ends up being linked to a domestic group, let's say a hate group. Well, then it does matter, because what it allows you to do then is to start to scrape into that group. You can make it a conspiracy. You can configure it as a group of people who look.
See, in some extreme circles, Christianity and Catholicism are the biggest threats to trans activists / alt-left people. You always hear about the threat of Christian nationalism being the plight of the West, the villain lurking in the shadows. I just don't know if I necessarily buy that.
To do something like this, and what I've been name checking all day is the thing that we had out in California where that guy bombed the fertility clinic. I don't remember his name, and I don't want to say it anyway. But while that didn't end up being a group, we all went away thinking, okay, one and done. That case is over. The guy blew himself up and nothing else to worry about. And lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, they charge a second piece. They're going to go all the way on this because of how horrific it is. You can rest assured, federal, state, local, doesn't matter. They're going all the way.
I want to go ahead now and bring in correspondent Bill Malugin. He's been.
People say we're dealing with a mental health crisis, which we can all recognize. But what does that entail? Say we had the resources for mental health institutions. At a certain point, we would have to admit collectively that something's off with transgenderism. And that is the very problem, because it's been entrenched in our society as just not even an orientation, but something that you identify as. I don't even think it's labeled as dysphoric. And getting society to collectively admit that is seemingly impossible.
Digging into the details all day, he has also covered many school shootings. It's an unenviable beat to be on. But Bill, Trey Gowdy pointed out on our air earlier today that it seems over and over and over again, these mass shooters are young American men, usually in their 20s.
Yeah, that certainly seems to be the case. We don't really know why, but that's the profile that's being fit in this one.
I mean, what do you mean you don't know why? It doesn't take a psych degree to figure it out. She missed a big detail. Well, detail aside, the claim that most mass shooters are white men in their late teens and early 20s would still hold true.
As well. Just looking at some of the information we're getting about the shooter here, identified as Robin Westman. Fox News obtaining the paperwork that back in 2019, his parents filed in the state of Minnesota to allow him to change his name from Robert to Robin. And on that paperwork, it specifically said it's because he identified as female. So that was the reason for that name change. But you talk about like the profile of these young guys committing these shootings, that certainly does seem to be the case pretty much every time we have one of these high profile ones. It was the case in Uvalde, which, I covered a few years ago. It was the case in Sandy Hook. Now, thankfully, it doesn't appear this incident is going to be.
I mean, how many times does this have to happen? Is this just a consequence of America? What the fuck?
Is bad, but you look at some of the things that are floating around online right now in terms of some of the writings. There's that manifesto flying around. We're obviously talking about a very sick individual here. It's going to take a while to figure out what, if any, motive there was here. You guys have been talking about the FBI, how they're announcing they're going to potentially investigate this as domestic terrorism, and rightfully so. This shooter.
I guess the other spin or optic of this is that normally, or at least in years past, it's been the archetype of an incel, human-hating, male goblin. But recently, there's the trans angle.
Apparently knew these kids were going to be there in mass, in class, at that time of the day.
I don't even know if it's productive to look at the political spectrum or even horseshoe and plot where they fall. And the reason why I think that is because there's just overlap at the extremes of both ends.
And just decided to post up outside with 3 weapons, as we found out. The police saying he came with a rifle, with a shotgun, and with a handgun. And, I've been listening to the sound bites of those children witnesses. You have a 10-year-old kid saying that, how terrifying it was to have bullets come flying through the stained glass. You had the one little boy say his friend Victor laid on top of him to protect him, took a round. I mean, think about it. A little boy potentially taking a high-velocity round from a rifle, being shot at from a nut job in a parking lot. He's one of the boys in the hospital recovering right now. And at the end of the day, 2 young children dead, Jillian, ages 8 and 10, 17 others injured.
More guns or less guns? That's a debate. I'm personally... I don't know how to combat a psycho with a gun other than a good guy with a gun. At this point, I don't know. I don't want that to be society. I don't want that to be the case. I don't want to have to look at guns when I step outside every which way. But holy fuck.
14 of which are children. Again, you were texting me about this earlier, and it's a perspective that's worth talking about. It's first week of school.
Guns have nothing to do with it. Look at Canada. 5th or 6th highest gun ownership globally, no mass shootings.
For these kids, this is the last thing they should be worrying about. They should be meeting friends and meeting their...
Unfortunately, it has evolved into an American-branded thing.
Teachers and having a good time. But this person, for whatever reason, we'll see what the investigation plays out, just decided to show up to that parking lot, post up outside, and just start firing dozens of rounds into that church. And again, what we've heard from the witnesses is it was just pretty nonstop. We heard the witness this morning describing it as they thought somebody was working on their roofing nearby because the bang, 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 bang was just so nonstop. It's just yet another horrific incident. It's unfortunate we have to keep dealing with these every now and then, and it just makes it so much worse when it's a school involving young children, Jillian. I mean, these kids are so innocent, and here we go again, whether it's Sandy Hook, Uvalde, a school like this. You have these elementary-aged kids. You hear the innocence in their voice when they're interviewed by the media, and it's just hard to watch something like that, especially watching the parents show up. Like when I was at Uvalde, it was so hard because there were parents coming up to us, the media, asking us what information we had and holding up pictures saying, have you seen my little boy?
This is fucking brutal to watch, dude. Jesus Christ.
Boy, have you seen my little girl? Can you put it on the news right now? Can you get it out there? And you just see the panic in their faces. And watching the live shots that we've been doing all day long, you see that, right? Especially, Paul and I were on set together earlier this morning when the parents were first starting to show up, and you can see the panic in their eyes. You can see them looking for their kids. You can see the relief on their faces when they're able to find their kids and bring them out. Imagine being one of those parents who showed up and wasn't immediately able to find their child, or didn't know what hospital they're at, or didn't know what happened to them. It's just horrible stuff. So I understand we're waiting for the press conference with Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. Last check we got is that is running about 5 to 10 minutes behind. So we have that live shot popped up for our viewers in the bottom right of the screen. We'll wait for them to come out, and we'll see what kind of new
Having better gun control at least reduces the tendency of getting instant access to such powerful weapons that causes these atrocities. I don't know the answer.
Developments we get, what, if any, further details we get on this shooter now as the rest of these children and some of the adults who were injured are still recovering, Jillian?
We are indeed awaiting another news update. We're hoping to hear from the governor, Tim Walz, potentially law enforcement officials, health officials there in the county. Let's go ahead and play that sound you referenced, Bill, a 10-year-old who was on scene today, saw
No way. They have the audio?
his friends get injured. It's incredibly difficult to watch, but guess what? We're going to play it because it's important that people see what is going on. Listen.
Yikes.
My friend like ran, someone helped him like run out. He saw him, he was wearing all black and he had a ski mask on. I was down, so I didn't really look up. I mean, he got shot through the stained glass windows. My friend Victor, he was like laying on top of me, like making sure I was safe, and he got hit. So that was really brave of him.
Now these kids are just going to be traumatized forever.
All right, let's bring in Ted Williams, former D.C. homicide detective, also a defense attorney and a Fox News contributor. I don't know, Ted. What do you say to something like that?
You know, Jillian.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It hasn't quite sunk in yet. He's talking about it quite normally. Because I don't even know how you process that as a 10-year-old.
Jillian, is just so chilling to hear that young child. That young child, as many of the children that was on this scene, are going to be traumatized by this incident the rest of their life. But let's just look at what happened here. This was a planned, targeted, cold-blooded killing.
I mean, of course it was. So I don't understand the investigation needed.
By this guy, Westman. Without a doubt, when you think about it, when he took two 2x4s, blocked the doors, so individuals who were in that mass praying could not get out, that says...
Why kill innocent people? Because evil exists in this world, and you can justify atrocities as long as it fits your worldview and ideology.
Great deal about what he had up his sleeves. He knew that he wanted to maximize carnage in that mass. I think you're going to find as part of the investigation that he has some familiarity with that Catholic school.
We can't show the book, but in the manifesto, he opens up to a page and there is a layout of the church and then stabs it with a knife and says, I'm going to kill myself.
And they were going to have mass, and how he could bring about shooting as many and killing as many as he possibly could.
Paul, I said it earlier in the show. I mean, this bears some striking resemblance to the Nazi pogroms that they carried out in occupied, parts of France and other countries in Western Europe during World War II. Outside of that, I have not personally been exposed to anything like this.
We have a follow-up video adding more context to the tragedy in Minneapolis. Let's give it a listen.
This was their first day of all-school mass, so they have mass once a week on Wednesdays.
Church shooter went by two names, Robin Westman and Robert Westman. You could just say Robert Westman was transgender, and we get the point.
And basically the way that it's set up is children and staff, they sit on the right side of the church. Then parents and other visitors who are just dropping in for mass, they sit on the left side. Mass is for an hour, and I guess it sounds like this happened at around 8:20, and the mass starts at around 8.
All right, let's bring in former NYPD Lieutenant Darren Porcher for your thoughts on what we know so far. Hi, Darren.
This is a challenging narrative, to say the least. The one thing that we...
And what's insane to me is that there will be people out there that will criticize the idea of dead naming the shooter. Think about that. That's how fucking insane our society has become.
Do know is the shooting began in the parking lot which is quite similar to several school shootings that we've seen in the past.
What is dead naming? It's the practice of referring to a transgender person by their dead name. So in this case, if they go by Robin and you call them Robert, you would be doing the bigoted task of dead naming them.
So it begs the question as to should we have a standing police, or I should say armed presence outside of that school/church, which is apparent that that's something that we should have had. And, you know, it really rings volumes in that the shooter was firing through an opaque glass, which was the stained glass in the church. In essence, they created a target-rich environment to shoot as many people as possible. And then when we speak to the state of Minnesota, you need to be 21 years of age to acquire a handgun. So the handgun was clearly acquired illegally. So it begs the question as to how was the shooter able to acquire this handgun in the state of Minnesota?
This is brought up a lot when they say bad guys will find a means to acquire a weapon if they really want to commit a crime. It's often used as a counterpoint to gun control arguments, and it raises an interesting point.
Which prohibits purchasing that firearm under the age of 21.
Something we'll also be curious when we get our next update from the police chief is any record of any previous record, criminal record, that is, of the shooter. It was made clear in the news conference that they didn't seem to find anything, but as we discussed earlier, perhaps there was a juvenile record. There could have.
Yeah, criminals don't follow the law in the first place.
Have been that we wouldn't know about. What did you make of that in the news conference?
Society just getting further and further from Christ. Well, literally, as this was targeted.
I understood that, but I think what's more telling was a manifesto in play, and has law enforcement not provided this manifesto, which I can understand because this is an ongoing investigation. We're not looking to put someone in jail because a shooter has already committed suicide, but at the same token, we're looking to extract the teachable moments, which would greater fortify that school or any other school for that matter as we move forward. So in terms of it being a criminal background, I just don't think it's something that's significant, but I am concerned with, is there a possible psychological dysfunction in the background in the shooter, which would be quite telling if the shooter's...
I wonder. I have some sort of fatigue, and I think it's bureaucratic fatigue. We just got to start communicating a lot more clearly and bluntly.
Sat down with a therapist, and the therapist was understanding that this was an individual with volatile tendencies that should have been checked appropriately.
Darren, obviously the start of a new school year. You've got
Nietzsche unironically speaks of this. God is dead.
I imagine schools all over the country right now are looking at, assessing, possibly reassessing their security measures.
All these religions, and they choose the most peaceful one to pick on. Well, if you ever talk to a leftist, I wouldn't even say liberal, Christianity, or at least the Americana brand of it, whether it be Protestantism, and I guess Catholic in this case, but they are seen as the threat of the West, Christian nationalism, because they have convinced themselves that Christianity is the antithesis of them as a human, being transgender or LGBTQ. They are not accepted. They are told that they are inherently wrong for existing, which I think is an incorrect generalization and oversimplification, and it's intellectually and factually dishonest. It's not correct.
What can be learned from this?
You know, what's interesting about this being a religious organization of education, these traditionally don't happen here. Granted, in the past, we had the...
That's what I mean. These people don't even have a firm grasp on Christianity enough to paint it as the boogeyman. It is schizophrenic.
Instance that occurred in Tennessee. But by and large, these types of shootings occur in public schools. And so the parents that have kids that go to this school probably figured, hey, look, you know what, this is a safe environment. I'm sending my children to a Christian school, so they're not going to be online what normally happens in a public school, and something like this happened.
He had written anti-Semitic and anti-Islam messages on the guns too. He hated all the religions and all this nonsense black-pilled to the max. I think there's something to unpack there for sure. Inherent nihilism. Because when you view all religions as locuses of control of the masses, you get into some dark waters.
It was an aberration, but at the same token, we're going to have an after-action review that provides us the teachable moments how to best fortify that school. One component would be drones. Understand, the archdiocese does not have the money that the public school system has. So they're somewhat limited in terms of the resources that they can introduce for security. But at the same token, this bears to be a necessity, not a...
Did he just float out the idea of drones? Unless it's a Predator B, bro. A DJI quadcopter is not going to do much. I don't think surveillance is the answer. Unless we're talking V2 missiles ready for deployment, like this. A camera's not going to stop a shooter.
So we need to move forward with the appropriate fortifications such as drones, an armed security officer that would be outside of the school, because when we saw what happened in Parkland as well as Uvalde, we had a shooter that began shooting from outside.
At this point, maybe more guns is the answer. Just post up law enforcement, security guards, ex-military, veterans, everywhere.
As they approach the building. So these are things that need to come into the mind of the...
Let's triple the defense budget and start cracking down. There isn't predicting hatred of this degree. You can only react to it. That's a very insightful comment.
Individuals that are creating the security matrix in the school to ensure the safety of those children that will be attending the school.
Did he go into the church or shoot it from the outside? From the outside, in the parking lot. But to my knowledge, he barricaded the entrance with 2x4s so they couldn't leave.
In the future.
Darren, the live shot we have up is still outside of the school. You can see the police tape and the police activity, of course, the FBI on scene. Just a moment ago, while you were talking, we had a shot up for a brief moment outside of the shooter's home. We did lose that shot. We'll try to...
I can't think of a single time someone has taken out a potential mass shooter with a gun before they cause significant casualties. I think there are actually a few anecdotal stories where somebody has stopped an active shooter, but I could be entirely wrong.
Get it back up again, but what we did see was police activity, quite a bit of activity outside the shooter's home.
A church in Texas stopped them in the act. He got domed by an old guy with a .44.
You would assume they're in there now. And just to remind everybody, the details of the shooter that we know so far.
Maybe Palantir is the answer. Put me on a list. I don't care. Take all my data as long as you're protecting me when I go outside. The state can have access to all my goon material. I don't give a fuck. I just want to be able to go to church on a Sunday and not get my fucking head blown off. I don't want to go to the mall and have to stay frosty and keep my coconut on a swivel. I'm over it. I used to think it was like cope to like go out in public and like, you know, you're always looking at like exits and shit. I do that unironically now. I have too much to lose. I can't be getting ambushed. It's time for me to be tactical.
Law enforcement officials are confirming to Fox News the two names of the shooter that have been used in the past, Robin Westman and Robert Westman. The officials...
We just shouldn't have to live in fear.
Saying that the shooter may have used both names.
It's perpetually fucking paranoid. It's disgusting. PvP servers everywhere.
But they are now at the home of the shooter, Darren. How will they conduct their investigation in the home, Darren?
Well, one of the commonplace issues or pathways would be to establish the digital footprint, which your guests have come on and spoke to in the past as it relates to social media, computers, and the cell phone. That's going to be quite telling as to why was there any indicators that were emitted from the shooter prior to the shooting? Secondly, we really want to drill down to, as I mentioned in the earlier part, the manifesto. Because this is not someone that had a tremendous criminal background, I genuinely believe that this was a statement. as to why they committed this horrific act. In addition to that, we want to also find out, was the shooter either a student? What was the connective tissue with this, the shooter and this school? And that remains to be the million-dollar question.
We low-key need an American CCP. Might be the way. Well, that's why I was talking about Palantir. Do you want freedom or security? And in times like this, I think a lot of people want security.
As to why the shooter selected this specific premise as it resulted in this horrific carnage that we're speaking to today.
We know that those.
I always said that we need a federal department that strictly focuses on mass shootings. Yeah, I think we should just call it domestic terrorism.